The Greater Hartford Gives Foundation invests in a wide range of projects, from arts to education. They recently celebrated their 100th year of existence and announced some major changes. Their projects include building a new headquarters and increasing funding for scholarships. But even the name of the organization is new. Until recently, the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation was known as the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. From Connecticut Public Radio, this is Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. This hour, we're talking with Jay Williams, President and CEO of the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. He joins to discuss his time at the foundation and his time in politics. Jay broke barriers as mayor of Youngstown, Ohio, and he later spent time in the Obama administration. Jay, it's great to have you on Disrupted.
Kalila, thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan and excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited to talk to you not just about the work that you do, which is so important, but the person who's doing that work. You, like me, are a transplant to Connecticut.
Correct.
And before this role at the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation, you grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. Talk to our listeners about Youngstown and what it meant for you to grow up there.
Boy, Youngstown, Ohio, a blue-collar, steel town, working folks who are in the heartland, the middle part of America, the Midwestern part of America, and growing up in Youngstown really shaped and forged my perspective on life, because by the time I was born in Youngstown, the steel mills had collapsed. It was once a city of great prosperity, manufacturing prowess. At one point had one of the highest home ownership rates in the country. And when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, born in the 70s, grew up there in the 80s and 90s, the message was you've got to get your education and leave, a one-way ticket out. And fortunately, I was blessed to be able to stay in Youngstown, to start my career there and really be a part of what I hope to be would be a renaissance of Youngstown, but it really has left a strong impression on me even to this day, as I've been in other places, D.C., and now here in Connecticut.
You know that I spent 5 years in Ohio for graduate school. And I often thought about Youngstown and the people of Youngstown as being scrappy, but very proud, proud of their town, proud of their community, proud of its people. And even as people were navigating challenges, it was a Youngstown pride that is really unmatched.
You described it to a T. In fact, there was a point of time where there was a semi-professional basketball team called the Youngstown Pride. And for years after the collapse of the steel mills, Youngstown was defined by its failures. I was fortunate to be a part of a contingent of individuals who saw the assets and the tenacity and the perseverance and the creativity, ingenuity of the people in the organizations and the companies in Youngstown. So you're right, having described that, there's a pride that I still carry with me. I've been to multiple places around the globe, other countries, almost all 50 states, and I have yet to come across some place where I don't run into someone who has a Youngstown story, whether it's good, bad, or in between. They have some connection and some knowledge of Youngstown, Ohio.
You have this pride in your hometown, but you also had a deep investment in your hometown. In 2005, you were elected mayor of Youngstown, Ohio, and you made history because you ran as an independent candidate, but you really talked about policy and possibilities for Youngstown. Walk us through that journey of deciding, not only will I get my education and stay here, I'm going to invest in leading this great city.
It was interesting because while I was growing up in Youngstown, there was that young person's thirst to see the world and go other places. And I thought certainly that I would like to experience that. And as it would be, I certainly think and believe in divine ordination and things happen for a reason, that my career was able to develop there. I went to work for the city with no aspirations or plans to run for mayor, but I was a part of a visioning and planning initiative that was really trying to set a new path for Youngstown, then called Youngstown 2010. So this was in the early 2000s. And as a result of that, the goal was to present this plan and this vision to the mayoral candidates who were going to be running in the upcoming election to say, this is what the people view as the future of this community, of this city. Unfortunately or fortunately, the primary candidates were not interested. They were interested in doing business as usual. Here's the politics of Youngstown. Here's how you run for mayor. We don't know who you are. We don't think this plan has any validity. Long story short, there were a group of us who said, we have just invested 2 years of community and civic energy in this plan. And if this plan isn't the central focus of the mayoral election, I think we're going to lose all trust of people. And we're certainly concerned about the future. So I ended up with a lot of prayer and counseling. I had to quit my job to run for mayor, believed that we put together this ragtag bunch of committed folks, ran it up against the political machine and the money that was raised. And lo and behold, we ultimately ended up winning what I did not realize at the time was a landslide. There were 6 candidates. We won 55% of the vote and ended up as the youngest, first Black American, African American, and the first independent to win in 80 years because people were ready for a change. And it was one of those defining and humbling experiences of my professional career at the time.
Youngest mayor, first African American, you run and win as an independent. You are no stranger to breaking barriers, but you also seem, Jay, very grounded in a sense of purpose that is not just about making history, but doing something transformative. Where does that sort of grounding and inspiration come from for you?
First and foremost, my parents, who were the biggest influence in my life, the way they raised my sister and I. Second only to my parents, my faith. My pastor, the late Bishop Norman L. Wagner, had such a significant impact in grounding us in purpose that I remember, and I have this saying, and I carry it with me, that he said, significance is paramount to success. There's nothing wrong with being successful, but it is more important to be significant, right? Because there are a lot of people who are successful who perhaps haven't done significant things. And there are a lot of people who have done significant things that the world would not define as success.
Let me ask you a really important question. I want you to think carefully and thoughtfully about this. This may be the most significant question I ask you today, Jay. Connecticut has recently branded itself as the pizza capital. But Youngstown is also pretty fond of its pizza. So let me put you on the spot. If you have to choose between Youngstown pizza and Connecticut pizza, which one are you choosing?
Kalila, I love the work that I've been doing here. I appreciate everything that has happened in the last 9 years of being in Connecticut, but that is not a choice, Kalila. The Italian food, the pizza in Youngstown, it is virtually impossible to walk into any restaurant in Youngstown, Ohio, or the Mahoning Valley and ask for pizza or Italian food and find something that is less than superb. I have recently, after 9 years, I found a couple of pizza places in Connecticut that my wife and I and our son, we enjoy. But Kalila, it's not a choice. I'm sorry.
Spoken like a true politician, Jay Williams. We will let you stay in Connecticut.
Very much appreciate it.
But I ask you that question not just to be silly, but to also think about the importance of place and how place can stay with you, that pride and connection can stay with you, but can also help you overcome some challenging times. You were leading Youngstown at a time of tremendous economic challenge for Youngstown, for Ohio, really for the nation. Were there particular moments during your tenure as mayor that stood out to you as reminding you of that purpose, but also how pride can get you through the challenge?
Absolutely. There were so many, and I'll just a couple of them. And some of them have to do with some of the challenges that Youngstown faces, right? So I remember getting a 2 a.m. phone call as mayor where the police chief was telling me about a quadruple homicide that had happened. 4 young people were killed in an abandoned house, all of them under 22 years old. So to have that moment and the impact that it has on you as a human being, then as a mayor, and the responsibility you feel for that, right? But it was also the community's response to that engendered a sense of resilience and a sense of healing. So there was that moment. And then there was the moment where, after a lot of negotiation and collaboration amongst Youngstown and a smaller city that was immediately adjacent, that we were able to secure over $1 billion of investment in one particular company that was expanding. And they were choosing to expand between Youngstown, Ohio, and somewhere in Oklahoma and somewhere in Texas. And I had an opportunity to travel to Paris, France, and meet with the CEO of that corporation to try to persuade them to make that investment in Youngstown, Ohio. And I'm suggesting that it was my visit that was able to ultimately land that deal. But to be able to have an investment of that magnitude in our community to create hundreds and hundreds of jobs to help redefine the economics of a city is also something. So that and everywhere in between, right? Going into the elementary schools and talking to the students and saying, hey, I played on that playground on the east side. I'm not magical. There's nothing special about me being mayor. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I walked the same neighborhoods that you did.
You broke a number of barriers. You had some substantive wins, significant wins in your role as mayor. And Jay, I often think about for someone to be first is celebratory, but it can also be even more challenging because now people look to you for this transformative approach. Whereas mayor, the streets still have to get clean.
Absolutely.
Law enforcement still needs to be taken care of.
Right.
The library still need to be open. What was it like for you balancing those expectations that are often extraordinary and unfair, but still realizing there's a job to be done?
You asked that almost as if you walked those streets with me as I still lamented the challenges in the neighborhoods, right? And the disinvestment that had occurred over several decades and the sometimes unrealistic expectations that this is going to be turned around, that we still have to rebuild our neighborhoods. We still have to figure out how to bring the school system up to a point of being able to educate and equip our young people for their careers. We still have to work about the tensions, the racial tensions that still existed in the city of Youngstown. So trying to balance those things, being very ambitious and excited about the privilege, but the day-to-day task of plowing the streets and having to negotiate the union contract with the firefighters and the police officers who deserve 20% raises, but you can only give them 3% raises. And then to have them say, well, we're going to have to come after you. We're going to have to say that you don't care about the safety of the residents of Youngstown because you're not paying your safety forces enough. So balancing those things, but always trying to keep perspective that it took years and years and years for the city to come to its difficult challenges. And my role was going to be, while I was privileged to be in that place for that season, to do the best that I can to hand it off to the next individual so they find themselves in a better, stronger place that they can continue that. So having that conversation, I think it also is brought home when I have it with our son, who was just one when we moved away. So that was where he was born. But when he goes back and say, Dad, well, why does the city look like this? Or what's happening here? Can you describe, Dad, you were mayor. Why didn't you fix this? Or why didn't you do that? So it's a humbling experience that sort of keeps you on your toes.
You talked about being mayor as a part of a season in the journey. After serving as mayor, you then went to Washington. So you served in the Obama administration as the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. That's a lot for a business
card. It is a lot.
And as Deputy Director of the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs at the White House.
Right.
What was the decision-making calculus of my season leading Youngstown has come to a close, and now I want to take this talent and this commitment to another level?
Great question. So it boiled down to a phone call that one morning my secretary called in and said, the White House is on the phone. Mayor, do you want to take the call? And I chuckled and said, sure. And long story short, it was the administration inquiring if I would be interested in joining. And the inquiry was based on the work that we had done in Youngstown, which was so gratifying. I had not gone out and campaigned for then Senator Obama. He came, I met him, I got to introduce him at a function. And I thought, when I'm done with my second term as mayor, boy, it would be great to go work in D.C. for the president. But this was in the first year of my second term. So I was reelected. I was early in my second term. And when the call came, again, it was humbling. It was the most difficult professional decision that I had to make because I had just been reelected to my hometown. We were doing work. But the conversation was that the work you're doing in Youngstown has so much applicability to places across the country. Detroit, places that had seen economic disinvestment and had redefined themselves, and even rural areas. So again, prayer and wise counsel, and with the support of my wife, we made a decision to accept the opportunity to serve in the administration. I had to step down and be in Youngstown. People were very supportive. They said, Jay, Mayor, you have to do this. As much as we understand you wanting to stay here, here's an opportunity to work for a historic presidential administration. So that's where the impetus came, and that's how I ended up for 6 years serving the Obama administration, the second half of the first term and then the full length of the second term.
Coming up, More with Jay Williams, President and CEO of the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. He'll reflect on his time with the Obama administration and how he thinks politics has changed since then.
I hope that there are more people who believe that even with whatever disagreements we will always have, that there have to be a basic set of things as a society, as a civic fabric that we agree on and then move from there.
This is Disrupted. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. This hour, we're talking with Jay Williams, President and CEO of the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. Before the break, Jay spoke about deciding to join the Obama administration during his second term as mayor of Youngstown, Ohio. I asked Jay to offer us a lesson in leadership from that experience. I was interested not just in his decision to join the administration, but how he positioned himself to be ready for the next step of his journey.
I think one of the most important leadership lessons that I learned was a leader's most important decisions is who they surround themselves with, because they need to be able to turn to those people in moments of crisis and moments of opportunity and get sage advice, not advice that you want to hear, not people who are yes men and yes women and who are there to, support your ego or to tell you that you know best, oh wise leader, but people to say, here's the facts, here's my perspective, here's my experience, here's what I will offer you in making an informed decision. And you pointed out something that I've been so blessed throughout my career that I have never really sought, like, what's that next position? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Having a very ambitious, clear plan. The opportunities to have come with the timing such that as I looked, I was always being prepared for that next, not because I was consciously doing it. I certainly wanted to do a good job, wanted to have an education and a skill set that was very marketable. But whether it was starting my career in banking, running for mayor, working in administration, or even the position that I hold now, I look back and I'm just so humbled and grateful that it is, I believe, ordained, right? Yes, I had to go through interviews. Yes, you had to submit your credentials. But I always was at a sense of peace that if I didn't get the position, it wasn't for me. And if I did, as long as I did the things I needed to do, that those positions would open up.
I'm thinking about where we are in the country right now, where there's so much cynicism. There is a feeling of many people feeling civic fatigue, if you will. And that's regardless of political party or ideology or position, where people are asking what is happening in our political space. The Obama era, even for people, again, whether you support or not, seemed very different. It seemed like a time where people were willing to come together across differences and across divisions and at least confront each other in a way that said, we want what is best for the country, even if we don't agree on the path.
That's correct.
Is that the case, or are we sort of romanticizing an era?
No, I think that what you've described is accurate both in terms of where the environment was during the Obama administration, even before that. Let's go back. Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill were not ideological partners, right? But what they did understand is that in the leadership positions and responsibilities they had to sit down and try to find some middle ground. And I think that was an approach that was present in our federal government for decades, even during the Obama administration. I didn't agree with every policy of the administration, but I agreed enough that I felt that there was something that I could do. And I think that was the same approach that then President Obama took, that you sit down with your critics, your cynics, and you try to find what's in the best interest, the rule of law, the preservation of democracy, the dignity of human beings, even if you have different ideological or values that might sit on different ends of the spectrum. And I think that is lost. And I think it has been cancerous and destructive to this community, and particularly with the current administration, where it's us versus them, where it's a domination, a dehumanization of people who have different values, different beliefs, unaccepting of basic facts of law or truth. So I don't think it's romanticizing. I think there's a warning that politics is always brutal. There's nothing wrong with that. And it can be a very difficult and challenging and confronting, a confrontational process. But if we lose the sense that democracy and the rule of law, there has to be some fundamental things that we agree on, that's a very dangerous place to be. And I think that's where this country is and has been for a long time. And I hope that there are more people who believe that even with whatever disagreements we will always have, that there have to be a basic set of things as a society, as a civic fabric that we agree on and then move from there.
I think there's no better place to see a civic fabric in action than at the local, regional, community level. And so it makes sense somewhat that after serving at the national level in the Obama administration, you moved here to Connecticut, where you became president and CEO of what we now know as the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. That makes sense to me. It sounds like a seamless transition to me, knowing what I know about that foundation, knowing what I know about your approach. But for others, it may seem like, well, why do you go from working in a presidential administration to leading a community foundation? Talk to us about that seasonal change.
If someone would have asked me what is your ideal job or role to do after having served in Washington, D.C., I'm not sure I couldn't have written it more perfectly than the way it happened. And again, that's where I go back to having faith and a belief and a desire. It was a privilege to work in the White House per se. Did not necessarily enjoy that. I enjoyed working in the agency, the Economic Development Administration, because it was closer to communities. And then when you talk about being close to communities, you can't be any closer to a community than a community foundation. So even the process of landing here in Connecticut, the administration had ended. Executive recruiters were reaching out. We were having conversations. I got a little bit of indication that the then Hartford Foundation was looking for a new CEO, but the recruiter told me, Jay, it's not worth applying. They're at the tail end of the process, and they're actually going to be making an offer to an individual. They said, just don't waste your time. You can submit if you'd like to. Long story short, I decided not to, but it didn't sit well with me, sort of my spirit. About 2 months later, the recruiter called back and said, hey, that job at the then Hartford Foundation, they're doing a new search because the individual that they offered the job to and accepted, he ultimately declined to take the position. And they said, on top of that, Jay, they don't want any of the candidates in the first round to reapply. So anybody who was associated with the first round is not going to be reconsidered. So obviously submitted my credentials, went through the process, had conversations with then the board committee and the search committee, and was offered this position in early 2017. And again, looking back to your point, it was absolutely seamless. Everything happened the way it was supposed to happen.
So when I first met you, Jay, you were new to the role. I was serving on the board of the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. Mm-hmm. And I just remember being so impressed by your commitment to bringing together spaces and communities that existed in the same location, mm-hmm. but weren't talking to one another. And bringing that sort of external perspective of, well, I didn't grow up here. I'm not wedded to a particular neighborhood. I want everyone to be in the space together. It seemed groundbreaking that was the approach. And I think you also had a very different approach to helping people understand what it means to be a community foundation. There are lots of private foundations in Connecticut across the country. What is that mission and that vision of a community foundation that makes it unique in that philanthropy space?
The fact, when you think about philanthropy, the two root words being phileo, or the love of, and anthropology, humankind. So the love of humankind, the love of community. It is often associated with giving of one's financial resources, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's also about the time and the relationships and the ability to give testimony and the ties. So there are so many other aspects of philanthropy that are part and parcel of being a part of a community, right? When you care about what's happening to your neighbors, when you are concerned about the quality of life and the well-being, whether you live, work, or play in a community. And coming to Connecticut, someone said, remember the 169? I said, well, they said that number will mean something to you the longer you stay here. And realizing they were talking about the number of political subdivisions and coming to a small state that had so many community foundations, particularly the large three being Greater Hartford Gives Foundation, New Haven, and Fairfield County, and saying, listen, these are individuals, leaders and boards and staff who are clearly committed. Why aren't we collaborating in more ways? Yes, we have our geographical areas that we serve. And we're not trying to cannibalize or compete like, well, we need these towns. But we all at our core are about improving the community. So we as leaders should talk and figure out how to collaborate. And guess what? In a relatively small state, those 3 community foundations cover upwards of 70% of the cities and the urban areas, not to say that the other areas aren't important, but we had so much in common. So that was an impetus wanting to learn, and my natural curiosity of wanting to know who were these other leaders, who were these other community foundations, and my curiosity of wanting to discover the state. I said, don't come to Hartford. I want to drive down to Fairfield or drive down to New Haven to meet the individuals, your staff and your board members. So I think that was just a perfect way to be introduced to the state that was new to me, new to my family, to both geographically see and then start to understand the other parts of the communities that make up the state.
I think about so many of the issues and priorities of the Hartford Foundation, but all of those foundations that you mentioned, and there is such overlap. Concern about housing, right, economic security, opportunities for young people, a commitment to the arts. Those are not concerns that are bound by geography, but can actually have a greater impact if you think of it in a different way. What is the role in particular? Well, let's talk about the name change first, right? So it's now known as the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. Walk us through that decision to change the name.
And to me, that is, sort of the core of the show, disrupted, right? So after 100 years, to change the name of an organization to something that better reflects the breadth and reach of the organization, because we cover 29 towns, not just Hartford. Hartford is where we're headquartered, but we cover 29 towns. The bidirectional notion of giving. The community gives to us, we give to the community. And we thought, if you're going to change the name of a 100-year organization, do it at your centennial anniversary. Understanding there will be risk. There are going to be individuals who think it is heresy to do that, that it doesn't sit well with. But we think because of some of the challenges with the previous name, there were people who associated us with the Hartford Fortune 500 company. There were people who thought we only served one community. There were people, when you talk about public giving, who thought maybe this is a government agency. So, we had a great organization, Big Duck, that we worked with, the staff team that came together with the support of the board. There were some tenuous moments where it's like, did we get it right? Did we have the right ingredients there? You have to give credit to my colleague, Brad Drazen, who is our VP of Marketing Communications, who really took this on in collaboration with the entirety of the leadership team. And after about a year and change, we went through the process, had to keep it very close to the vest, hit a few hurdles along the way, but emerged with this name that now seems so natural. It seems so relevant to who we are, both a nod to our history, but who we are as an organization now and reaching to that next generation of philanthropists, whether they actually start a fund or they give of their time or their energy because they live, work, and care about the region that we serve.
That aspirational vision is grounded in relationships and trust. And I think about this time where public trust feels so fragile, where people feel disappointed that promises were made and not kept. Right. Your foundation is saying, no, we are in a unique position to be stewards of that trust and to do it not just in the immediate sense of where we are right now, but where we want to go. What is your particular vision as president and CEO leading this organization?
You hit the word that often is so powerful, the stewardship of not just the financial resources, but the stewardship of the trusts and the aspirations that families for decades have had in this organization. And my view, my vision, and again, it's a collective vision that is informed by my colleagues, informed by my own experiences, informed by our board and our donors, is to be an organization that is relevant and impactful in helping to address some of the most pressing challenges in our region. Many of those challenges are rooted in the inequities and disparities that have existed in this country since its beginning. And we can't get away from those that are based in race and ideology, those that are based in classism and economic disparities. But to be an organization that if you live, work, or play in the Greater Hartford region, that you see a place for yourself in our organization. We work directly with our nonprofit partners, with our public sector partners, with our corporate partners. So someone says, well, I'm not ready to start a fund or I don't have the resources. That's okay. We still want you to see the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation as an asset, as a catalyst to improving the quality of life, to addressing those inequities and disparities, however you find it. And I think with the organization, the board of directors that we have that is the most diverse it's ever been in our 100-plus years history, the most diverse staff in every way, with the resources that we have, I'm excited about this shift, both in terms of our name and our brand and some of the other things as I look over the next 5 to 10 years.
Coming up, more with Jay Williams, President and CEO of the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. He'll talk about some of his organization's recent changes.
I have always aspired and thought that we could do things and should be doing things that would be of national relevance.
This is Disrupted. Stay with us. Welcome back to Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. This hour, we're talking with Jay Williams, President and CEO of the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. Before the break, Jay told us about changing the name of the organization from the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving to the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. But that's not the only change they've recently announced. Here's more of our conversation. When you talk about the work of change, there will always be people who say you're doing too much too fast.
Right.
And those who will say you're not doing enough quick enough.
Right.
And you talk about a legacy organization with a 100-year history and trying to build consensus while still saying we have to have a North Star that we are working toward. Many groups, Jay, would change a name and be content of letting that be the big change or the big disruption. You have gone all in at a time where sometimes I read headlines like, wow, how are they doing that? Talk to us about some of those changes of, yes, a new headquarters,
right,
but deep investments in ways that others have said, let us play safe and quiet.
Sure.
Hartford Foundation has said, no, we have to be all in.
We do. And along with the name and brand change, we announced that we are going to be relocating from our 7th and 8th floor office tower view that gives us a great view of the Connecticut River and downtown Hartford and the communities that we serve, to moving to make a significant investment in one of the poorest census tracts in the state of Connecticut, one of the poorest in the country, the Clay Arsenal neighborhood. And to not just say, oh, we're putting up a shiny new building for our own headquarters. What we are saying is that this is going to be a gateway, part of a gateway vision that has existed for more than 10 years, a community hub for nonprofits and for the neighborhood groups, the NRZs, to be able to convene and for us to do training, capacity building. And for the $35+ million we intend to invest to be catalytic, to be a part of a larger vision to invest in small businesses, to create greater housing opportunities. So we were excited about that. And again, we know investing in census tracts that are economically challenged isn't just like, oh, we feel good about doing that. We believe that we have an obligation to steward those resources in a way that provides not just a typical financial return, but a community impact return. So that was another exciting announcement that is still going to be 2.5 years before we move in. We have to do all the things that are necessary to build and construct this. But for those critics who are like, oh, you're just building a shiny new headquarters for your staff, nothing could be further from the truth. So that was an exciting endeavor. Along with one of the other things that was groundbreaking for us is our partnership with Hartford Promise, creating the Greater Future Scholarship, which is a scholarship of up to $100,000, along with up to a decade of wraparound services that we said our investment in education, while we're proud of it, doesn't meet the demands and the needs of today's students. When you talk about the student loan debt crisis, when you talk about first-generation students who are often alone trying to navigate college experience and early career experiences, that was one of the other 3 major announcements that we hadn't talked about yet today that we are exceedingly proud about.
You said that this had been visioning over the last 10 years. that particular neighborhood, like so many neighborhoods across the state, has often felt disappointed, where people will talk about them or talk around them, plan for them without listening to them. Your approach, the approach of the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation, from the beginning seems to have been, no, let's be in conversation and partnership and led by the community saying, this is not just what we need, this is what we deserve.
Right.
That means, Jay, as you know, it can take much longer
Absolutely.
to build that trust
Absolutely.
and consensus. Talk to me about that process of being sure if we are going to be a foundation rooted in community, we have to be with community.
We have to live those values. And you're right. It is probably the least efficient way to do a project is to come in and say, have conversations to make sure that we're understanding that we're not seen as coming in as doing something on behalf of the community or for the community, right? What we're saying is that we're a new neighbor, but we're an old friend. You've known us for decades. The services and the impacts and the relationships that we've cultivated, that is exceptionally important to us. And we're not taking for granted because we have those relationships. We can just come plop down in your neighborhood and say, look, pat us on the back. So having those conversations has been part and parcel of this from the very beginning. Part of the criteria that we established that we wanted to be in a neighborhood that was accessible, that had catalytic potential, that we could be a partner to help accelerate and make manifest the visions and the aspirations that those stakeholders who existed long before us, living and working and investing there, had. So that was really and continues to be a part of this. And we told all of our professional partners, our architectural partners, our construction partners, our real estate consultant, we need your expertise. And we appreciate, and we're going to pay for your expertise, but you need to understand our values are leading this. Before we talk about the angle of a building or what type of external material, let's talk about making sure that the small businesses or the contractors or the service providers understand that they are going to have an opportunity to be a part of this in a meaningful way. So when they walk their child to school, they can say, oh, look, mom or dad's small business supplied that project. Or look, we had an opportunity to help shape and inform what this project is going to mean. So it is so important to us. And you're right, it is more costly financially in terms of time. There are more frustration points, but that's okay because we are here for the long haul. And it's going to be that much more, I think, exciting and welcomed by the community when we ultimately cut the ribbon and they can have the same pride that we have as they walk by or engage or interact with the building. And it's also gives us an opportunity to give a nod to the historic investments that have happened there, whether it's the Jewish community, the Puerto Rican community, the African-American community, the Caribbean community, the art, the ingenuity, the entrepreneurship, all of that is helping to inform this project for us.
There is a lot of criticism and really, I think, misinformation about the nonprofit sector, not just in Hartford, not just in Connecticut, but across the country. And the nonprofit sector is really struggling right now of feeling that there are increased demands, increased need, and that support is waning because of a lot of that critique. Mm-hmm. What are you hearing? You talked about, the community. What are you hearing from your nonprofit partners right now about their need to meet what's happening right now, but still have a forward-thinking vision?
You're right. There is a significant struggle. There is increased need. There is increased demand, and there are fewer and fewer financial resources, as we are seeing from the federal economic environment and policy environment. Fortunately, and I give credit to the state legislative body and to the Governor Lamont's administration of recognizing the need to step up, and I'm glad that we're in a state that is doing that. But it is dire to see the attacks on our nonprofits providing basic human needs, housing and food and shelter, and then putting ideological litmus tests on whether or not they can serve a population. I was speaking at University of Hartford a couple of weeks ago, and one of the examples, I pulled a list of words from the federal government that if these words are in the language of the nonprofits, and some of the words are women or oppressed communities or inequity or disparity or opportunity, that they are subject to having a rescission of federal funding by just talking about words, right? In 2026 in the United States of America, certain words will trigger an attack from your federal government, your tax dollars, the government that is supposed to be for the people, of the people, and by the people, to harm our nonprofits who are serving. Is every nonprofit perfect? Absolutely not. Is there waste, fraud, and abuse? In every corporation, on every planet, in every country, you can find things to say, oh, but if you choose to paint a broad brush and say, well, because we found this, therefore all of these other nonprofits should suffer, there wouldn't be a business open in this country. So part of what I appreciate about our team and the executive leadership team and the team at the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation is recognizing that and figuring out what can we do. Philanthropy will never be able to fill that gap, but we do have an obligation to be more creative, to be more flexible, but to also have greater resolve to stand in the face of this attack on our nonprofit community.
That investment and commitment to human dignity and human possibility, there are two other investments that were announced over the last year that I think are so critically important for our listeners because of what we're seeing, not just the federal level, but also across communities. The Greater Hartford Gives Foundation also announced appreciation grants to support arts funding. And I remember during COVID, there was this real fear, Jay, that when people are thinking about basic needs, art does not come to mind for many. And yet we know art can be a convener.
Absolutely.
It can be a balm to the soul
Absolutely.
that helps people go up. Talk to us about these grants and the commitment of, yes, we are going to commit to 50 arts organizations through this funding.
Right. So you described arts as a healer, as a convener. It's an economic driver. It's an educational tool. And we have benefited, whether consciously or just in the background, from the richness of our creative community. What we wanted to demonstrate was how appreciative we have been. So the upwards of 50 arts organizations where we had $4 million worth of unrestricted grants just to say thank you. Thank you for what you do, whether it's the large organizations like the Bushnell and Hartford Stage, or the small organizations where they bring students or kids together from the neighborhood and put on your local productions. It was just an opportunity to demonstrate and to acknowledge how valuable those organizations are. And then also recognizing the path and the plight of individual artists, right? So there was then, in addition to the $4 million, $2 million that we worked to help create opportunities for individual artists to be recognized and compensated for their creativity and what they add to all of our lives, to connect them with organizations so they could have leadership opportunities, so they could have training and capacity build opportunities, so their entrepreneurial endeavors could be greater sustained. So it was just one of those things that it was never enough, right? $6 million, as significant it is just a token of the appreciation that we and so many others have. But what we wanted to do was to make sure that in this centennial year, particularly just 5 years after COVID, and some of them very much still struggling, that they knew that the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation was appreciative and continues to see them as such a critical part of the fabric of this community.
You are leading one of the larger community foundations here in Connecticut, but you are also part of a cohort of larger community foundations across the country, and larger being based on assets. What's the conversation that you're having with your peers at the national level to say, this is what we were able to do here in Connecticut, understanding those national challenges? What's the conversation that you're helping to contribute based on your experience here?
I have always aspired and thought that whether it was in Youngstown, Ohio, that we could do things and should be doing things that would be of national relevance. And the same thing holds here for being in Hartford, that there are so many lessons and opportunities that we have and things that we can push the envelope and try to be innovative or disruptive about that would be a part of a larger conversation. So whether it's with our Greater Future Scholarship, whether it's with our community funds, one of the other announcements that we made where it's a groundbreaking participatory grant making, where we're saying the decisions of where grants go in the community shouldn't always rest with just the community foundation. We think that the people who know best are the people who are closest to those opportunities and challenges. So across our 29 towns, there are upwards of 300 volunteers who we have imbued with the resources and the training so they make the decisions, not the foundation, not the CEO, not the board of directors. The decisions are made at the community level. And we're excited about that. And we've shared that with other community foundations across the country about how ambitious it is to do 29 towns at once. And they've taken notice. We've also, again, had conversations that we don't have the first Promise program, certainly Kalamazoo, there's the New Haven Promise program, but how we said we think that mating with or marrying our scholarship to Hartford Promise's scholarship in their wraparound services really helps to change their narrative. So the national discussions around student loan debt crisis, national discussions that are also around diversity and equity, we were very conscientious about making sure we continue to use those words, but also not critical of our fellow community foundations who are in politically different parts of the country who still are committed to it, but perhaps can't use that terminology. So I'm glad that I have the opportunity to serve as the chair of the Council on Foundations, which is a national organization, but really to have a relationship with community foundations, both large and small, across the country.
You, Jay, are at the forefront of tremendous possibility and tremendous change. But it also means that you are balancing very challenging situations to decide how will we make the decision to go in this direction and not another, understanding the importance of community and how it shows up throughout your life in all of those sectors. And so I wonder for you, as someone who is doing this great balancing act, what brings you joy that may not be the work, but fortifies you to do the work?
The joy does bring me work. My wife teases me and she says, Jay, in good times and bad, if you're stressed out, you throw yourself into your work. Jay, when we're on vacation, you're still always checking in work. So I've had to find that balance. But it's first and foremost the people that I get to work with, like my colleagues, just the diversity of experiences and talents and stories they bring. I am naturally curious, right? I remember as a kid, my friends would sort of roll their eyes. Jay, you ask so many questions. You're always asking questions. And I am. And when my son does it, I have to remind myself, Jay, that's where he got it from, both myself and my wife. So I think that brings me joy, understanding and being curious about other people's paths, what brought them to Connecticut, what brought them to the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation, what brought them to that other thing they do when they're not at work. I have found joy in the things that just on a personal level, picking up, getting back to running, playing golf, being outside. And just now, I shouldn't say just now, but as our son grows into his teenage years, a reminder of the time that is precious, right? Family always being important and central to everything that I do, but even more so conscious to this, having recently lost my mother. It adds a perspective that while I enjoy the work, it is more the people that I get to work with every day and the people that we engage in the community that bring me just an immense amount of joy.
Well, we are so grateful that you are channeling that joy and purpose into commitment and change, and that it's not just a commitment for you, but that you are creating opportunities for others to pursue their passion and their purpose as well. It's what makes Connecticut a strong place and what makes this country stronger. So we are grateful that you are doing that work.
Thank you.
Jay Williams is president and CEO of the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you for having me. So appreciative to be here, Kalila.
This episode was produced by Kevin Chang Barnum, Robin Doyon Aiken, Erica McIntosh, and Meg Fitzgerald. Special thanks to our interns Davina Corderu and Megan Rodriguez Hawkins. Additional thanks to Will Brown. You can listen to more than 250 episodes of Disrupted in our archive. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. From Connecticut Public Radio, this is Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. Thanks for listening.